Okay guys, this is going to be the third and last time that I try this today. I'm not really sure I'm going to do it from my iPhone. Hopefully you guys can see me good. I look very big on the screen. Again, I'm going to try to do this. Let's set this up to where I can see comments and stuff on my phone. If it goes down again, I am probably going to do a recording and post it later. So if it goes down again and you guys want to ask questions about anything in the video, you can definitely, message me on Messenger or whatever, and I can answer those questions for you just through email or Messenger. Because I have no idea why the live keeps going down today. So I'm going to try and get this one to work. Hopefully you guys can see me and hear me. Again, I am so sorry. But I want to make sure that you guys know that the information will still be here. Even if this stops for some reason. Hi again, Sarah. I'm so sorry about all of the difficulties that's been going on, but we will get there. So hopefully we'll have more people popping on here. I'm going to go ahead and just get started since we've done this a couple of times. How many, let's see. We were talking about how many people have owned or worked with aggressive dogs. And I know a few of you had already said that you did, or you had a lead reactive dog or something like that. So I'll just kind of go through the stranger danger thing again in case somebody only watches this video, because I will probably try to delete the other two. So most common stranger danger, people coming into your home, your dog is, lunging at them, barking at them, sometimes growling at them. It can happen outside of your home towards people. It can happen, on walks when you're walking your dog. Or it can happen, dog to people aggression can happen when they're guarding. So guarding a food bowl, guarding, a toy or a bone or something like that. Those are the most common types of dog to people aggression cases that I see. And again, we see lots of different cases, and the one thing that you have to do with aggression is you need to figure out what's the reason for the behaviors happening. And I will tell you that there are several reasons that they could happen. The most common reason that dogs are aggressive towards people is fear. Fear, anxiety, and stress are the top ones. There are a couple others that we'll go over also, but fear is, fear of a person, fear of a situation, fear of something the person is doing. It could be fear of, losing a toy, fear of losing food, fear of losing any of that. So mostly fear is what many cases are based in, is they're doing the aggressive behavior so that they can, look really mean and scare the person away, or whatever. And so most of it is because they're afraid of whatever the stimulus is that is causing them to display the aggressive behaviors. And aggressive behaviors can be anything from growling, lunging, snapping, snarling, biting, obviously. And we see all of those things with most aggressive behaviors that we work with. A couple other things that can cause dogs to show aggression is pain. So a lot of times when I'm getting a history of, what's been going on with the dog, what behaviors are happening, those kinds of things, I want to know medical. So, how recent is the behavior change? Have they started it in the last couple of months? Have they been doing it for 3 years? Because usually if it started recently, or if it's a sudden change, I'll refer to a vet. Let's go find out, make sure they don't have anything going on medically before we continue with the behavior modification plan. Some other reasons that I might refer to a vet is, if your dog is showing aggression, when somebody touches their ears, they may have ear infections, so we need to get that checked out. During any kind of other handling, so if you're petting your dog or you go to pick your dog up or whatever and they show aggression, then we might want to look at, again, pain. Maybe something that you're touching is hurting them, and so we need to have that figured out, because training is not going to help pain. You need a vet for that. So anything that I think may be causing the dog to have pain, and that pain is what is fueling the aggressive behavior, then we're going to have that checked out first, just to rule out any underlying medical conditions, because that's not my job. That is the vet's job. I don't try to diagnose. That is not my job. So I will have them check them out if I suspect that some of the aggression may be coming from a pain-related issue. Also, I don't ever label a dog as an aggressive dog, because it's like labeling a person as an aggressive person. They're not aggressive all the time, and so they're not necessarily they have aggression, or they're an aggressive person. They display aggressive behaviors in situations that cause them to feel the need to be aggressive, and we do that as people also. So what I look at when I go into an aggression case, so first thing I do is we get a complete history. I want to know a lot of different things. How long has it been going on? What are the exact behaviors that the dog is displaying? Have they ever bitten someone or another animal? If they bit them, was skin broken? Was it just a bruise? Did animal control have to step in? Was it really bad? And then I want to find out, in those situations, tell me, what was going on. What did you do, or the person that got bit? What were they doing? And right before the dog bit. And then I want to know what the behavior looked like. Did the dog just bite someone and then back off? It's almost like they do a bite and release. So that's most bites, actually. So they'll bite and then they jump back and they're like, now what? If you leave them alone, usually they will stop. If you keep coming, they may aggress even more, and it may escalate quickly, actually. So, I want to know what the behavior looked like. Did the dog bite and shake, or did the dog just bite? Was there puncture wounds, that kind of stuff. I want to know everything I can about the actual behavior the dog did, what happened right before, and then I also want to know what happened after. So if you have a dog that's outside and you're on a walk and they are barking and lunging and just going, totally nuts at a person, I want to know things like, what was the person doing? Were they, was it a runner? Was it a jogger? Were they on a bicycle? Was it on a skateboard? Did they have on, hats or sunglasses? Were they talking loudly? Were they moving their hands a lot? How far away were they? Were they coming toward you? Were they standing still? I want to know what the person was doing, because that's going to tell me, possibly what triggered the dog to react in the way that he did. So, those are the things that I start with. I also want to know, how often they might eat. Do they live in a city environment? Do they live in, a subdivision? Do they live out in the country? Does the dog take walks? where does the dog take walks? How long is the dog taking a walk? I want to know, are there kids in the house? Has the dog ever been aggressive towards the kids? In what situations? Again, we always want to know what situations, what the dog's behavior was. And usually if you find out what happened right before, which we call an antecedent, and then what the behavior is, and then what happened right after, which we call a consequence, then you can normally, with just answering those 3 questions, you can normally figure out why the dog did what it did, and this is what causes it. Because when we know kind of what is triggering the dog to do the behavior, then we can change that behavior. Either our behavior has to change so that we're not triggering the dog, or we just need to change the behavior the dog is doing to a more appropriate one, or just another replacement behavior that the dog can do instead of doing the aggressive behaviors. So one thing I like to try to remember when I'm working with people, because I know they call us all dog trainers, but honestly, we are people trainers. The dogs usually pick up on things pretty quickly from our body language, and we're usually pretty plain about how we get them to do it, the cue that we give them, and things like that. But usually we're training the people, and that's with any dog training, not just aggression. And a lot of people are really scared when they work with aggression, whether it be an owner or even a trainer, because a lot of people think about the bite. So one of the first things that I do with all of my clients is I send them a video on body language, and it's the most common body language that shows stress in dogs, or fear in dogs. And so those are the things that I want them to learn first, so they can tell whether their dog is getting too stressed in a situation, and if they are, they can remove them from that situation. And a lot of times that's going to get rid of the aggressive behavior in that situation, because they've just removed them from it before they got really starting to show those aggressive behaviors. So who can tell me what are some of the body language signals that dogs give off to tell us that they are afraid or that they are stressed? You can just list your answers in the comments and see what you guys can come up with. What are some of the most common body language signals that a dog gives us that they are stressed or anxious, fearful? Does anybody know any of those? I always look at one of the most common ones is the dog is lip licking, or they will turn their head away. We call it a look away. Those things are, look away is like they'll look this way, but they'll kind of look back with you with their eyes, and you can see the whites of their eyes. Yes, licking lips, hackles up, absolutely. The hackles, if some of you don't know what that is the fur that goes, it can come from the top of their head all the way down the back to the tip of the tail, and it's when it stands up. Hackles up can be fear. It can be when they're really excited, like when they're playing, they can raise their hackles. And they can raise their hackles when they are, possibly contemplating some aggressive behaviors. Drooling, yawning, lookaways, side eye, will eye, yep, all of those, Kate, absolutely. Ears pulled back, yep, that's fear. When they pin their ears back. Now, I will tell you that there is a way that dogs will put their ears back when they're also playing. It's not as extreme, I guess, as I would do the ears pinned to the back of the head, but they are kind of like folded over a little bit, not like inside out folded, but just kind of folded and laying in the back when they're playing. So you have to kind of look at the rest of the body and not just ears back to determine, kind of what's going on. Or you don't want to just look at, oh, it's got its hackles up, it's going to attack somebody, because it may be, just really excited and playful. So you have to look at the rest of the body. Are they bouncy, wiggly, whatever, that happy, loose body that we want dogs to have when they're having fun and when they're playing. And so they can do that and have their ears pulled back. So it could be that play ear going on. So yeah, there's a lot of stress signals that dogs give off. When you're outside on a walk, this happens a lot with the reactive dogs. Is they're on leash. They may see or hear something that they're uncomfortable with. So you're walking down the sidewalk. There's cars going by, and we get what's called hypervigilance. Hypervigilance is when the dog it's almost like they are in a frantic kind of state. So they're constantly like looking around, over here, over here, over here, over here. We call that hypervigilance. And hypervigilance is a stress signal in dogs if they are really stressed in the situation that they're in. Yes, lowered head, tail tuck, paw lift. Yep, they shed when they're stressed a lot. We see that in group classes a lot. When dogs get up to do an exercise or something, there'll be fur everywhere. You also have sweaty paws. Those are harder to see unless you're on concrete or something like that, but they happen a lot. Hypervigilant. I mean, they're too overwhelmed in the situation. And that's kind of part of the problem when we have the reactive dogs on leash is we're putting them in those situations to walk them every day, and they're seeing if they're afraid of people, they're seeing people all over the place. And one thing that I have to look at too is that just like people, dogs release cortisol into the system. It's the stress hormone that we call it. And in dogs, it's been shown that stress hormone or, whatever can stay in a dog's system for up to 72 hours. Obviously, it depends on the dog and how they metabolize things, and how much cortisol was, released in their system and things like that. But if it stays in their system for, 3 days, basically, then, we're taking them out every single day, sometimes twice a day, and more stress. And so we get what's called trigger stacking. So we take them out first thing in the morning, and they're okay, I don't like it, I'm a little stressed, but then we take them out later that afternoon, and now we're stressed up to here, and then the cortisol's not out of their system yet. The next morning we take them out again, then we take them out for evening, then we take them out the next morning, we take them out for evening. So their cortisol level is up here. And at some point, it's going to stay kind of in this range, just a small range toward the top, because we're doing it every day. And so we're stacking stress on top of stress, on top of stress, on top of stress. So a lot of times when I go to one of those cases where the dog is taking a walk every day, or, 2 times a day, 3 times a day, one of the first things I tell them is for the next 3 to 4 days, you don't take a walk with your dog. You play with them in the backyard. If you do have to take them for a walk, say you have a dog that needs to go for a walk to go potty because you live in an apartment building or something like that, and you have to go for a walk, do it at times when there's not people. And I know that that's hard. There is a book out there called The Midnight Dog Walkers, and it is about dogs that are aggressive towards people and stuff on walks. And, they're going out at midnight because there are at least less people out, depending on where you live. Sometimes there's no people out at that time, and their dog can take a stress-free walk. Or you go to a different location where there are less people. You can take your dog to, a business that's closed for the night or whatever, or they haven't opened up for the day, and you walk them in the parking lot. Go to a church parking lot on days they don't have church events. There are places that you can go that it's less likely that you're going to see people when you have a dog that has the leash reactivity. and then your dog is only really interacting with or coming in contact with the person when you're in training mode. And so when you have the dog that reacts to people when they come in your home, you're going to have to, typically work with a trainer if you're not a trainer yourself. But you'll have to have other people because you'll have to have somebody to come in and all of that. And you are going to have to work with the dog. But when you're not working with the dog, you're going to have to limit their exposure to, their trigger. Because if they're constantly exposed to their trigger, then it's much harder to get them to be able to learn, because a dog that is stressed cannot learn. Dogs that are stressed and they're over their threshold, which means they're reacting, they're barking, they're lunging, they're growling, they're doing something, that's over threshold. And at that point, they are not learning anything because at that point, they're in that fight or flight mode, and their frontal cortex, which is their learning brain, has been kicked off. The reptilian brain, that fight or flight, that's kicked in. So if they're reacting, your dog is not going to be able to listen to you. Your dog is not going to be able to do any commands or cues or, anything that you tell them to do. They're not listening because they now have tunnel vision because they are in fight or flight mode. Usually it is fight mode if they're on leash or if they are cornered or they're in a tight space or something like that because they feel like they have no flight option. So the only option left is to fight. Which is why we get a lot of dogs on leash that do that because they know their flight option is gone because you've got a 6-foot leash and there's no way they can get away. So we want to make sure that during training, you're only exposing them to those stressors when you're training. And even then, you need to be at a distance that the dog is comfortable, where the dog can see the person, but they are not close enough to the person that they are reacting at all. So they can see, they're alert. You can see that their ears are forward. They can look right at the person, but they are not at the point where they are barking. They're not lunging. They're not pulling. They're not, growling. They're not doing anything except looking at the person. Couple of ways you can do this. You can do the counter conditioning with desensitization. You can do straight desensitization. You can do straight just counter conditioning with classical conditioning. So it depends on the dog, how severe the behaviors are. Have they injured another dog? Have they injured a person? Those cases, sometimes I will start with classical conditioning. Yes, I will talk about that in just a second, Olga. Thank you for bringing that up, though. So you want to make sure that they can see, because this is also kind of teaching some coping skills for them, that they can see what they're afraid of or what they don't want to be near, but they're not having to react to it. And, I could go into like all of the protocols of exactly how you do that, but it's basically if there's a person and the dog sees the person, as long as the person is in view of the dog and the dog can see the person, the dog gets food. Now, the food has to be something that's high value, very reinforcing to the dog. And of course, dogs determine what's reinforcing. So you're going to have to maybe try a couple of different things to see what's reinforcing enough for the dog to be able to do this. I usually start with, I usually use protein. So like a meat, chicken breast, grilled chicken breast is typically my first go-to when I'm working with aggression, because most dog food, the protein is chicken, so the dog should kind of be able to process chicken in their system already, because sometimes you're going to be given a lot of food depending on how you're working with the dog. If you're doing classical conditioning, I usually have the person go in and out of sight kind of randomly. So they might go behind a building, they might go behind a tree or a bush, somewhere where the dog cannot see them any longer. Yes, the dog knows they're still there, they can smell them, but they don't have the visual. And sometimes with dogs, visual is what gets them going. Some dogs, the scent of a dog or the scent of a person can do it, but it's very rare, or at least fewer than the sight ones. So you have the person randomly, and I mean randomly, so they go in and out of sight. So they may stay behind stay behind something, and that is, they're there for 30 seconds, and then they pop back out. They stay out for, say, a minute, and then they go back behind the tree or the building, and they may stay there for 10 seconds and then come back out again, and then stay out for 30 seconds and then go back in, and go back behind something. And so you want to randomize when they are when the dog can see them, because that's what's going to happen when you're on a walk. You're going to be walking somewhere and somebody's going to come around a corner or pop out from behind a car, or something. So you want your dog to be used to things just showing up. When the person is out and they can see them, they get food. When the person goes behind something, they get no more food, and it becomes very boring. You're not talking to them necessarily, or overly, praising them or anything when they're gone. They're not getting any food though. And then you do that, and if you're going to throw in the desensitization with it, once your dog is comfortable, so you're reading their body language, and they're no longer showing those stress signals. A lot of times when they're ready to move forward, the dog will either try to go forward themselves, but it's not in a lunging or pulling type of way, or they will sometimes just lay down and just turn their head away from the stimulus or the person. And when that's the case, okay, let's take another step forward. Sometimes you can go more than one step forward. You have to watch your dog's body language. So if you take 2 steps forward and your dog starts to get more tense, or they get that upright kind of forward, really alert, or they might start barking, you want to move back again. So you're always doing it at the dog's pace. Depending on how quickly your dog can get in that more comfortable zone where they're not reacting still, and they can see the dog and they're not reacting, then that's when you can move forward. And you want to just do it slowly at their pace. With some dogs, I've worked with some dogs that took 12 to 16 weeks to get better. I've worked with some dogs that 4 weeks it was better. Sweet spot is somewhere around 8 to 12 weeks for most dogs. But that takes a lot of practice from you doing this with your dog. And again, if you are only exposing them to their trigger or the person when you're training, I only do this training like once a day for no more than 20 to 30 minutes at a time. Because anything over that, your dog is going to get more stressed because they've been in the situation too long, and they're usually going to go over that threshold, and you're going to see some behaviors. You don't have to see any of the behaviors, the aggressive behaviors, to be able to fix them. So I go to a lot of people's house and they're like, don't you want to see him, growl at me? No, I'd really rather not provoke the dog to growl again. So that's another thing that why we have them, stop exposing them to the stressors, because, it's that trigger stacking. I mean, I don't want to make a dog more stressed or anxious or fearful of something. Plus, this training it's very mentally challenging for dogs. Most of the time when I work with dogs with aggression cases, we go through the training, and usually before I leave their home, sometimes usually within 10 minutes of us stopping the training, and we're just sitting down and I'm talking to the owners, recapping everything, answering questions, giving them their homework for the week, or handouts or whatever I have to do. The dog falls asleep usually while I'm there before I leave their house, because they are mentally exhausted. And so we have to look at, a lot of different things, of what, why dogs do this, and then how to fix it. I've had The ones that are hardest for aggression cases is in home, two dogs are fighting, because the trigger is always present, either by sight or by scent. Those are the hardest cases. Not to say that they can't get worked on and they can't get better, but those are the hardest ones to actually, solve successfully. And there's studies out there on this, and if I can remember correctly, two females fighting in the home is the least successful. I think it's like a 68% success rate or something like that. If it's female. If it's female, it's higher. If it's male, it's between the two. So it's really interesting that can happen. Does anybody have any questions, specific questions about your dog? Let me go back to Olga wants to talk about aggressive dogs in shelters and how do you start behavior modification. So when I start with a dog in a shelter situation, they're typically in a kenneled area, or they are, it depends on the shelter and their setup, but they're usually in a kenneled area. And so if they are people aggressive, one thing I try to have shelters do is, when you do your evaluation when the dog comes in, you're going to find out if they are people aggressive pretty quickly. Your animal control officer is probably going to tell you before anything else that, it lunged at them or it tried to bite them, or, they're going to have behaviors before they get to the shelter. Typically I don't know, most shelters do an evaluation when the dogs come in. Some of them wait for a little bit, a day or so, before they ever do an evaluation. My preference would be to wait, give them that decompression time, 3 to 4 days before you try to do any evaluation on the dogs, because a lot of times the dogs are scared when they come in, because they've been captured or caught or whatever, and they're already stressed because, they're in a new location. Most of them have to be, caught with a catch pole, so that's a little frightening, by a stranger that they don't know, which is frightening. And then we put them in a new situation, and a lot of times in shelters, there's a lot of dogs barking, which adds more stress. But I usually start with trying to put the dog, if I think it's, a new dog that comes in, I would try to put them in a kind of a separate location first to get that decompression. So somewhere where it's less noisy, less foot traffic, and somewhere where you can get some distance from the kennel. Because what you're going to be doing is you're going to be walking toward the kennel. You're going to be, hi Vic, you're going to be walking toward the kennel. You're going to be walking and tossing treats to the dog. Don't make eye contact with the dog, because obviously direct stares at dogs are threatening to them and they will react to them. But if you are just walking by and you toss chicken or something into their kennel and then you leave, that's a way that you can start. If you can get distance, if you have I have a pet tutor, which is a automatic feeding thing. So no evaluations in the shelter. Okay. Likes one man and has, let's see. Let me see this somewhere. Likes one man and has been in the shelter for 8 years. Oh gosh. He can't be separated into a quiet area. Is there no quiet area for him to go to, or is just nobody can move him from where he's from? Because if he has to stay in the location that he's in, then, new people, so he likes this one man, so you could start with that man being close to his kennel, and when a person comes into the dog's view, other than, so the man is with the dog, and he has the chicken or whatever you're going to feed the dog as a treat, and high value, obviously. If he's okay with the man being close enough for the man to toss the dog the treats, you can do that, where a person appears in the dog's view and he feeds the dog food as long as that person is in view. When the person goes out of view, no more treats. If the situation is where there's no distance that you can get, the new person or the stranger can get from the kennel, it's fine. You can just kind of slowly walk by the kennel, and as you're walking by the kennel, the guy that the dog is okay with is constantly tossing food in there, and as you go by the kennel and you're out of sight, then it stops. Very crowded. Stay in a kennel with loads of barking dogs around, so literally no space. Do you guys do any environmental enrichment in that shelter at all? Because that will kind of help some. Because lack of environmental enrichment can be one of the trigger stacking things that can happen. So they're not getting mental stimulation or whatever, and so they're stressed because they're not getting to release that mental energy. So if you're doing enrichment, which can be anything, you can plaster peanut butter to the side of his kennel and let him lick it off. So anything that you can do to help environmentally enrich him, to give him something mentally to think about, to give him something mentally to focus on, other than, the other dogs that are around that are barking in the shelter. So anything that can give him some mental focus. I know it's really hard sometimes with with shelters, because they are, all the dogs are kind of in close proximity. There's dogs barking a lot, and it can be very stressful for dogs. If he's been there for 8 years, he might have gotten used to the dogs barking enough that it's not as stressful for him anymore. But you can still do this, this protocol where you are, you can, a new person can come and they can stand not straight on to the dog. You always stand, with a side view to the dog, so you're less threatening to the dog, and you can just, toss chicken yourself while you're standing there and then walk away. So that anytime he sees a new person, he's getting good things. So you're pairing food, which is something dogs like. If they didn't, they would all die. With something that's scary or something he doesn't want around. And so it does take time to work on it. Okay. Yeah, if you, I don't know what kind of kennels that you have, if it's like a chain link kind of kennel, or if it's solid sides of the kennel. If there's solid sides on the kennel, like block walls or something like that, you can just spread peanut butter over top of it, on an area to have him lick it off. If the one person that he's good with can go into the kennel with him, you can just take little small treats, like just regular dog treats, and a lot of times I will take and put peanut butter on the back of them and kind of glue them to the wall, or even to the floor if there's no wall. You can, I've seen some shelters, they don't put the things in the kennels. They'll put like a Frisbee or something with peanut butter smeared on it and hook it to the outside of the kennel, where they can get to the peanut butter or whatever, but they can't like grab a hold of the Frisbee and pull it through to chew it. So that is definitely something that you can do also. Does anybody have questions? Any other questions about working with a dog aggressive dog or resource guarding or anything like that, you're welcome, Olga. And if you need other suggestions on what you can do with that, feel free to private message me, and we can talk about some other things that may be possible in your area. That way I can get a little more information from you, but I'd be happy to help with that. So does anybody have any other questions related to aggression in general, or how to work with dogs that are people aggressive? Because I know I get a lot of those cases where new people come into the home and the dog is barking and growling and lunging, and then they feel like the only option is to take the dog into another room, which it's good management, but it's not training, and the behavior can sometimes get worse because now you've removed the dog every time somebody comes over, and now they really don't like people coming over because they have to be removed from their family. So that's something to think about. Kate, as a trainer, when or how do you know it's appropriate to start taking cases? You want to have a lot of training under your belt, which I know you do. You want to be able to know that you can read dog body language really well and really fast, because with some aggression cases, if you don't do it fast, you might get bit. But if you can read dog body language and you're comfortable with classical conditioning, you're comfortable, you know how to do desensitization, those things are primary. You want to definitely have that, but having just the skill to do those things is pretty good. And so I don't want a novice trainer who's just getting started training dogs to try to go straight into aggression training. Usually when you go into behavior training, you need to have anywhere from, well, I know the IAABC says before you can become a animal behavior consultant with them, it's like 500 training hours is the least that you should have, because with that many training hours with dogs, you should know body language by then. You should know how to get a history, an appropriate history for aggression.